We've seen some of the issues that young people get involved with. Most recently, invisible children that went viral around an issue that you would not have expected young people to take up as a cause. So it's really heartwarming, and I think all of you in this room, being here, mean that you identify with and you support the passion that Isabel has. She's the kind of child we all want our children to be near so that they can infect them with that enthusiasm and responsibility. But back to HIV. Clearly, in the last 30 years, great strides have been made. We have a much simpler test. You can know your HIV status in 5 minutes. 30 years ago, there was no test. You can even get your HIV test through a saliva test. You don't even need to have your blood taken off. What's interesting is that there are parts of Washington, D.C. that have higher HIV rates than countries in Africa. And they're taking the lessons from Africa and bringing them back to the United States to try and test the entire population of certain districts of Washington so that people know their HIV status. Today, we have drugs that reverse AIDS, the state of being very sick, and bring people back from the dead. They even have a name for it. It's called the Lazarus effect. Because people who are near death, if they get the right treatment, can come back to life. And as you heard, the Infectious Diseases Institute was established 10 years ago to be able to provide this treatment, to be able to provide training to doctors and nurses and laboratory technicians, to be able to manage people with HIV and bring them back from the dead, and teach health workers around Africa how to put the Lazarus factor, if I may call it that. And today, IDI has trained over 10,000 people from around Africa. So how has this happened? About 4 years ago, I did a tour of the United States with the then Ambassador Dybel. Mark Dybel was the US ambassador responsible for a program called PEPFAR. This was a program that was initiated in 2003 by President Bush, building on to work that President Clinton had started, and which has continued through into the current administration. I was amazed how little Americans knew about a program that is probably one of the most important programs that America has initiated to help people in Africa and elsewhere. There are millions and millions of Africans, and clearly thousands and thousands of Ugandans who would be dead today if it had not been for the generosity of the American people. Over 80% of the drugs that are saving lives out there are being funded by Americans through taxpayers' money. And the reason that I come from Africa to travel here is partly to thank all of you in this room, because the faces that I see that are alive today are in part alive because of the collective effort of the American people. So allow me to say thank you on behalf of those who cannot travel here. But clearly there's a lot more to be done. Only about 50% of the people who need treatment are getting treatment. So there's another 50%, another 15 million people out there in Africa who need treatment. We've trained 10,000 health workers, but there are thousands more that need to be trained. So I will continue with my mission. I'm very pleased, Isabel and Accordia have joined forces with IDI. It is imperative for all of us that we have the younger generation, that we are able to pass on our skill sets, that we are able to pass on our passion. So tonight, we are gathered here to support Isabel, to understand about the challenges of HIV and malaria and tuberculosis in Africa, to appreciate that a lot has been done, and a lot has been done by America, but a lot remains to be done. And we can only defeat HIV, we can only get a vaccine against HIV by continuing to work together. So I hope that this evening has inspired some of you, or all of you, to get involved. And if you wish to get involved with IDI, with Accordia, or with Isabella's future life as a doctor, Dale will talk about that. All I want is to extend an invitation For those of you who want to come to Africa, not just to see IDI, there is so much good and things to see and do in Africa. People who come to Africa for the first time said, I wish I had known that, you know, Africa is not just what I see in the newspapers. There are lovely people, there are lovely places, there's lovely food, there's baskets just like yours. So take this as a personal invitation. If you are ever near Uganda, please come over to see IDI. Isabella, I invite you to my home to stay with me one time when you come to Uganda and see firsthand what you are talking about in terms of the action in Uganda. So thank you very much for listening to me, and Dale,